Hello, my name is Franish, and I want to discuss how to maintain and how to most properly use your Gpen. There are very few videos up on YouTube about how to actually keep your Gpen intact. It's mostly just comparisons about whether you should be using a dip pen or whether you should be using a fine liner. And in this video, I'm also going to discuss the secondary to the Gpen, the Kabura Pen, which is basically just a smaller Gpen. But these are the only two nibs that are also really going to be relevant. And then I'll just talk a little bit about how to use a brush pen afterwards. So, with your Gpen, let's talk about the mistake that absolutely everyone makes that is just unbelievably bad for your pen, and that is to clean it by dipping it in water. Don't ever clean it by dipping it in water. Even if you think there are marks on it, you should always just wipe it with a piece of tissue and then be done with it. And also, pay very close attention on what kind of paper you're using. If you see in this line here, the paper has feathered a little bit, meaning that the ink has kind of leaked out into the seams of the paper because it's not perfectly smooth. I'm sure not everyone can afford to get their hands on the perfect kind of paper for their pen, but the smoother you can get, the better. And try and get paper that's meant to be specifically compatible with your pen, like deleter paper exists. And deleter ink exists too, but a problem I find with deleter ink, which I also find with things like Winsor and Newton ink, is that it will often form this kind of a skin, I would almost say, when the ink separates from the pigment that will sit at the bottom of your inkwell, which is unbelievably annoying and bad for your drawings, and also makes your ink almost completely useless. Only brand I have found so far that doesn't use that is the Jackson's Indian ink, and no, I'm not a Jackson's Indian ink salesman, but so far every other ink requires so much constant use and so much constant maintenance, it's just completely not worth it, especially if you're not using your Gpen for 8 hours a day. So, of course, the fundamental advantage of a Gpen over using a fine liner is that you can change your line thickness by pressing harder or lighter, which is basically just going to increase your efficiency in drawing more than it's going to have been when you were using regular fine liners, although that does not mean that you should use exclusively your Gpen, because fine liners still have their purpose. So by drawing from a side on with your Gpen, you can usually get your thinnest lines, and by drawing from a top down on your Gpen and pressing, you'll get your thickest ones, and you can have a nice bit of variation. Gpens are not very good for hatching though, I would say, unless you are very talented with them, which I am not. And you see over on this side of this drawing, I have attempted to hatch with one. And I would actually recommend using your Kabura pen instead. So let's talk about the Kabura pen. You just want to use your Gpen for drawing thick, strong lines. If you've got really powerful hatching like I do here, feel free to use your Gpen. Also, you want to dip it just kind of either below the hole or just above it. Never go to the very core, because it will gather at the back here, and always kind of rub it off the edge of your inkwell to get that excess off. As for your Kabura pen, I would almost exclusively use this for hatching because it is much smaller and much nicer for it. See if I can't get this to focus in. There we go. And then you can kind of draw a little circle at the base and then a flick upwards to hatch it. A lot of people use the Kabura pen exclusively in position of the Gpen because they simply can't get used to the pen pressure, and this can carry over into your digital art as well, where many people will not even have pen pressure enabled because they've never had it as an experience when they were doing traditional art. And I'm just going to say nothing will harm your drawing speed or your drawing quality more than never getting used to or making use of pen pressure. And so I recommend not always using the Kabura pen, and even if you do want to always use the Kabura pen, I see no purpose to it, as you should just use a mic fine liner instead, whether they be Microns or I've got these Stads. Doesn't really matter what brand they are, although I've heard Microns are the best. And as for filling out your blacks with your brush pen, you do not want to ever try and toe the line and just get it just perfectly, unless you are some kind of god with it. You want to just fill in the inner gaps and then take a decently thick fine liner and use that to fill in the outer gaps. Remember that it is okay to make a few inking mistakes, and that I do recommend to either just, until you've got the hang of your tools, reprint your sketches, because it is so much more worth it to be used to the Gpen than to just constantly have to put it away again. Well, that'll conclude this video. Especially why I wanted to share that thing about never dipping your Gpen in water. That is so irritating for me. You'll notice what your Gpen does is that the ink does not like lay upon it perfectly and smoothly, and that instead your ink will sort of like pool in little spots around it, and you might think, why is this happening? Why is this happening? And I've seen a lot of people who think that it's this because the sealant is still on your Gpen from when you ordered it. And yes, that can be the case, and they'll stick it in potato and they'll take it out and it'll work for a few minutes, and then they'll dip it in a pen, they'll dip it in water, and then or they'll leave it at the window where it gets all moist, and suddenly they'll be back to sticking in a potato for another 10 hours. Just remember that and don't go through the same suffering as I did. The Gpen will always be more efficient than the Micron when it comes to inking. So I just recommend it as an investment. Thank you.